Kelvari Station did not hum like the high-end Federation docks Brennan Holt had read about in manuals. It did not sing with the harmonious frequency of well-oiled efficiency. Kelvari Station groaned. It clanked, hissed, and occasionally screamed when a pressure valve blew out in the lower sectors. It was a massive, patchwork structure drifting in the neutral zone. A celestial truck stop where the coffee was strong enough to strip paint, and the laws were loose enough to keep everyone polite. There were only two real rules on Kelvari Station. Etched into the metal bulkhead by the main airlock, don't shoot a blaster inside the house, and don't let a ship explode in the bay. Brennan liked the rules. They were simple. They were manageable. Much more manageable than the current situation in Hangar Bay 4. "Pass me the 3/8 hydrospanner, Sweet Pea," Brennan said, his voice muffled. He was currently lying on a mechanic's creeper, slid halfway underneath the underbelly of a diplomatic cruiser that cost more than the entire station. "The blue one or the red one?" a small voice asked from the vicinity of his boots. "The blue one. The red one is for thermal coupling, and if I use that on a kinetic dampener, we all go boom." "Okay." A small, grimy hand slapped the tool into Brennan's waiting palm. Brennan adjusted his grip, wiping a streak of grease across his forehead with his sleeve. He was 28 years old, though his back often argued he was 50. He had the kind of face that was usually hidden behind a smudge of engine oil, sharp jaw, tired eyes, and hair that had given up on being combed 5 years ago. "Thanks, Penny," he grunted, torquing a bolt that refused to cooperate. "How is Mr. Sparks doing? Is he behaving?" Penny, his 7-year-old daughter, was perched on a shipping crate a few feet away. She was wearing a pair of oversized coveralls he had cut down to fit her, and her hair was tied back in 2 chaotic pigtails. In her lap sat Mr. Sparks, a stuffed animal that might have been a bear, or perhaps a dog, or maybe a genetic experiment gone wrong. Mr. Sparks was missing one eye, and his stuffing was leaking out of a seam in his side. But Penny held him with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. "Mr. Sparks says the ship smells like purple," Penny announced. Brennan paused his wrenching. "Purple? That is ozone and expensive coolant. Don't lick anything." "I know, Daddy." Brennan smiled to himself in the dark underbelly of the ship. This was their life. It wasn't much a 2-room unit near the core, nutrient paste for dinner 3 nights a week, and the constant fear that his lungs would finally give out from the old radiation scarring, but it was theirs. He was a good mechanic. He fixed things. People on Kelvari Station respected that. If you could keep a freighter flying with duct tape and prayer, you were a wizard. But today, the atmosphere in the hangar was different. It was heavy, thick. Usually, the hangar was a cacophony of shouting dockhands, whirring drones, and the loud curses of captains arguing over docking fees. Today, the ambient noise had dropped to a terrified whisper. Brennan felt the vibration in the floor plating before he heard the footsteps. It was a rhythmic, predatory thrum, boots that did not clomp, but stalked. "Daddy," Penny whispered, her voice dropping an octave. "The scary lady is here." Brennan sighed. He had hoped to finish the coupling adjustment before the client arrived. He gave the bolt one last, straining turn until it locked with a satisfying click. "Just stay in the crate, Penny," Brennan said softly. "Don't stare. Rich people hate it when you stare. It makes them feel like they have spinach in their teeth." "She doesn't have spinach," Penny noted. "She has big teeth." Brennan frowned. He was about to slide out and check on his daughter when a voice cut through the air. It was not a shout. It was a low, resonant sound, like a cello played with a bow made of velvet and razor blades. "Why?" the voice asked. "Is there a grease stain on the portside intake valve?" The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ventilation fans seemed to hold their breath. Brennan recognized the tone. It was the tone of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. This was the owner of the ship, Empress Valindra Soth Khan of the Kelvari Dominion. He had heard the rumors. Of course, everyone had. The Kelvari were a humanoid feline race, tall, lithe, with strength that made a Wookiee look like a couch potato, and Valindra was their queen. The story said she once decapitated an assassin with a dinner plate because she didn't want to stain her gloves. They called her the Cat Queen, but never to her face. To her face. You called her Your Imperial Majesty while looking at your own shoes. Brennan stayed under the ship. He wasn't hiding. Exactly. He just preferred the company of the hydraulic pumps. "Answer me," Valindra commanded. Her voice was closer now. He could see her boots from his vantage point. They were made of some dark, polished leather that absorbed the light, armored at the shins with purple metal. "Who is the lead technician?" A shuffling of feet. That would be Jarek, the hangar foreman. Jarek was a good man, but he had the backbone of a jellyfish when it came to authority. Your Majesty," Jarek stammered. "We are a team that is working diligently. The stain is merely cosmetic. We will clean it." "Cosmetic," Valindra repeated. The word dripped with disdain. "And this," she tapped something metal with a sound like a claw striking a bell. "This coupling. It is installed perpendicularly to the flow drive." Jarek faltered. "Standard Kelvari naval architecture dictates a parallel integration for harmonic resonance," Valindra stated. "This is wrong. Rip it out. Start over." Brennan closed his eyes. Oh, for the love of gears. He couldn't help it. It was a physical reaction. Bad engineering offended him more than bad manners. "With all due respect," Brennan said. His voice echoed from underneath the ship, bouncing off the concrete floor. The boots stopped moving. The silence in the hangar deepened, if that was even possible. It shifted from nervous to funeral. Brennan cleared his throat, still lying on his back, staring at the complex underbelly of the starship. "If you install that coupling parallel to the flow drive on this specific model, which is a Series 4 diplomatic cruiser, modified for long jump capability, the harmonic resonance won't stabilize. It will amplify." He paused, waiting for a rebuke. None came, just the heavy weight of a predator listening. "So," Brennan continued, feeling the familiar itch of technical explanation, "by the time you hit light speed, the vibration will shatter the containment field. Your ship won't just stall, Your Majesty. It will turn into a very expensive, very bright firework about halfway to the nebula. You will explode before you finish your morning tea." He waited. "Who?" Valindra's voice was now a low growl, vibrating through the hull and into Brennan's spine. "Is speaking to me from the floor?" Brennan sighed. He grabbed the side of the ship's chassis and pulled himself out. The creeper squealed a high, piercing sound that made everyone wince as he rolled out from the darkness and into the harsh light of the hangar bay. He sat up, wiping his hands on a rag that was already 90% oil. He blinked against the glare. Standing 5 feet away was Empress Valindra. She was terrifying. She was magnificent. She stood nearly 6.5 feet tall, clad in ceremonial battle armor that looked both decorative and deadly. Her skin was a pale, moonlight lavender, and her hair was a cascading mane of silver. But it was the face that held you. High cheekbones, ears that tapered to elegant points, and eyes that were pure, glowing amber with vertical slit pupils. She was looking down at him as if he were a particularly uninteresting insect she had just stepped on. Brennan stood up. He wasn't a short man, but he felt small next to her presence. He didn't bow. He was too tired to bow, and his knees clicked when he bent too far. He just nodded. "Brennan Holt," he said, "lead mechanic on this shift." He gestured with the oily rag toward the ship. "The microfractures in your fuel line indicated stress from the previous parallel installation. Whoever serviced this ship last was following the manual, not the physics. I installed flex coupling. It looks ugly, but it absorbs the shake. You live. The ship flies. Everyone is happy." He looked up and he made the mistake. He looked her in the eyes, directly, in Kelvari culture, as he vaguely recalled from a drunk spacer's story once. Direct eye contact with royalty was a challenge. It was an act of aggression. It was a solicitation for a duel. The air in the hangar seemed to freeze. Jarek, the foreman, made a small, whimpering sound and covered his face. Valindra's eyes narrowed. Her pupils constricted into razor-thin lines. Her upper lip curled back just enough to reveal canines that were definitely not human. A low, rumbling sound started in her chest, a growl that triggered every primitive alarm bell in Brennan's mammalian brain. She took one step forward. The sound of her metal heel hitting the floor was like a gunshot. "Look at me again," she whispered, her voice smooth and cold as liquid nitrogen. "And you are dead." It wasn't a metaphor. Brennan knew that. She could probably cover the distance between them in less than a second, and open his throat before he could drop the wrench. His heart hammered against his ribs, thump, thump, thump. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw Penny. She was clutching Mr. Sparks so tightly that the bear's remaining eye was bulging. She looked terrified. Fear for himself vanished. It was replaced by the pragmatic, weary annoyance of a single father who just wanted to finish his shift and make sure his kid didn't have nightmares. Brennan didn't look away. He didn't flinch. He just let out a long breath and gestured vaguely behind him with his thumb. "With all due respect, Your Majesty," Brennan said, his tone shifting to a dry, conversational drawl. "If you kill me, two things happen. One, nobody else here knows how to calibrate that flex coupling. So you are stuck in this dock for another 3 days eating station food. And trust me, the synthetic meatloaf is a war crime." Valindra blinked. The growl in her throat hitched, just for a fraction of a second. She had clearly expected begging. She had expected trembling. She had not expected a critique of the cafeteria menu. "And two," Brennan continued, reaching back and blindly grabbing Penny's hand, pulling her gently from the crate to stand behind his legs. He positioned his body as a shield, a human barricade between the apex predator and his child. "My daughter here will have to sit outside the airlock with a cardboard sign that says, 'The scary alien cat queen killed my dad. Please tip the orphan.' And frankly, that is just bad PR for your diplomatic mission." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a tank. Yarek looked like he was about to pass out. The royal guards behind Valindra tensed, hands hovering over their weapons, waiting for the order to vaporize the insolent grease monkey. Valindra stared at him. Her glowing eyes scanned him from his messy hair, to his oil-stained jumpsuit, to the protective stance he took over the child. She looked at Penny, who peeked out from behind Brennan's leg. "You are insolent," Valindra said. The growl was gone, replaced by a sharp curiosity. "You bargain for your life with scheduling inconveniences and public relations?" "I am a practical man," Brennan shrugged. "Dead men don't get paid, and I have rent due on Tuesday." He realized he was still holding the filthy rag. His hands were black with grease. He looked down at Penny. She had a smudge of dirt on her cheek, right under her eye. Without thinking, ignoring the Empress, ignoring the guards, ignoring the fact that he was technically in a standoff with a galactic superpower, Brennan knelt down. "Hold still, Pen," he murmured. He used a cleanish corner of the oily rag, with a gentleness that belied his rough appearance. He wiped the smudge from his daughter's face. He tucked a stray hair behind her ear. "There," he whispered, "clean." He stood up, stuffed the rag back into his pocket, and turned back to the Empress. He wiped his hands on his thighs, the same motion he used for his daughter, now used to prepare himself to touch the royal vessel. "Look," Brennan said, his voice businesslike again. He pulled a datapad from his belt. "I am not trying to be difficult. I am trying to keep your ship in one piece." He walked forward. The guards twitched. Valindra raised a hand, stopping them. Brennan stopped just outside of striking distance and held out the datapad. "These are the stress readings from your port engine. The red line is what happens if you fly with the standard coupling. The green line is my fix. The numbers don't lie. Physics doesn't care about royal protocol." Valindra looked at the datapad. She didn't take it. She just read the scrolling numbers with her sharp, predatory gaze. She processed the data faster than a human could read a menu. She saw the thermal spikes. She saw the harmonic dissonance charts. She saw that the scruffy human was right. Her ears twitched. It was a microscopic movement. But Brennan caught it. She was annoyed. not at him, but at the fact that she had been wrong. She looked up at him. For a moment, the vertical slits of her pupils widened slightly, taking him in. She wasn't looking at a servant anymore. She was looking at something else, an anomaly. "Are you certain of this calibration?" she asked. Her voice was still cold, but the threat of immediate violence had receded from 100% to perhaps 40%. "I would bet my life on it," Brennan said. Then he glanced at his daughter and corrected himself. "I would bet my share of the air supply on it." Valindra straightened up. She adjusted her cape, a flowing garment of velvet that shimmered like a nebula. She regained her composure, the icy mask of the Empress slamming back into place. "Very well," she said. She did not say thank you. Queens did not say thank you to mechanics who corrected them in public. She turned on her heel, her movement fluid and sharp. "Finish the repairs. We depart in 6 hours." She began to walk away, her entourage scrambling to follow her like ducklings trailing a swan. But after 3 steps, she stopped. She didn't turn around, but her head tilted slightly to the side, her pointed ear swiveling back toward Brennan. "And Jarek," she called out. The foreman squeaked. "Yes, Your Majesty. No one else is to touch my ship," Valindra commanded. Her voice carried across the entire hangar. "Only the insolent one. If I find anyone else's fingerprints on my hull, I will have their hands for trophies." She paused, and Brennan could almost hear the smile in her voice. Not a nice smile, but a sharp one. "He claims to understand the physics of my vessel better than my own engineers," she added. "Let us see if he can survive the pressure." With a swirl of her cape, she was gone, sweeping out of the hangar doors. The tension in the room broke like a snapped cable. The air rushed back in. Jarek collapsed onto a crate, fanning himself. The other mechanics started whispering furiously. Brennan just let out a long, slow exhale. His knees felt a little watery now that the adrenaline was fading. "Daddy," Penny tugged on his sleeve. "Yeah, Sweet Pea. Is she coming back?" Brennan looked at the datapad in his hand, then at the massive, sleek, dangerous ship looming over them. He thought about the mandate she had just given. Only the insolent one. "Yeah, Penny," Brennan muttered, rubbing his temple. "I have a feeling she is going to be coming back a lot." He looked at the flex coupling he had just installed. It was ugly, practical, and sturdy, just like him. "Come on," he said, patting Penny on the head. "Let me finish this up so we can go get some noodles. I think I earned double meat tonight." "Yay, double meat," Penny cheered, hugging Mr. Sparks. Brennan knelt back down on the creeper. He slid back into the darkness under the ship, back into his world of metal and grease, where things made sense. But as he reached for his wrench, he couldn't shake the feeling of those amber eyes burning into him. He had just stared down the Cat Queen of the Kelvari Dominion and lived. "Look at me again and you're dead." He smirked in the dark. "Well," he whispered to the bolt he was tightening, "I guess I better not blink." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of focused labor. Brennan worked with the kind of rhythm that only came from years of doing the same thing over and over. He checked the seals. He calibrated the fuel injection. He ran the diagnostic software 3 times because he was paranoid, and then a 4th time because he was Brennan. Penny had fallen asleep on the crate. She was curled up in a ball, Mr. Sparks tucked under her chin, breathing the rhythmic, heavy sleep of childhood. Brennan paused for a moment to watch her. The harsh industrial lights of the hangar softened around her. She was the only clean thing in this entire station. He owed the doctor 3,000 credits for the last round of lung treatments. The interest was piling up. He had 2,000 stashed in a vent in their quarters. If this job paid out the bonus Jarek had promised, he might be able to pay off the interest and keep the collectors away for another month. He coughed, a dry, hacking sound that rattled deep in his chest. He pressed his hand against his mouth until the spasm passed. When he pulled his hand away, there was no blood. That was a good day. "Holt!" Jarek's voice hissed from the walkway. Brennan slid out from under the ship again. "What is she back?" "No." Jarek hurried over, looking anxious. "But her head of security is." He wants a status report. And Holt, be careful. The Kelvari don't like it when outsiders touch their tech. You embarrassed her earlier. I saved her ship, Brennan corrected, standing up and stretching his back. There is a difference. To them. Embarrassment is worse than death, Jarek warned. Just keep your head down, finish the job. Don't make any more jokes about orphans. It wasn't a joke. It was a risk assessment, Brennan muttered, but he nodded. Don't worry, boss. I am just a mechanic. I fix the pipe. I take the money. I go home. But as Jarek scurried away, Brennan looked up at the ship's hull. The metal was strange Kelvari biometal. It felt warm to the touch, almost alive. It wasn't just a machine. It was a partner to its pilot. He picked up his scanner and walked to the rear thrusters. As he worked, he noticed something. Valindra had said she would return in 6 hours. But the hangar doors were opening again, only 3 hours later. And walking through them wasn't the security chief. It was Valindra. She wasn't wearing the heavy ceremonial armor this time. She was wearing a lighter, form-fitting flight suit made of dark violet material that looked like woven shadow. It was still regal, but practical. She looked less like a monument and more like a warrior. She didn't have her entourage. She was alone. Brennan stiffened. He wiped his hands on his trousers, pointless. They were permanently stained and waited. She walked straight to him. She moved with a silence that was unnerving on a metal floor. You are still working, she observed. It wasn't a question. The ship is big, Brennan said. I have 2 hands. Valindra stopped a few feet away. She tilted her head, looking at the ship, then at him. My engineers tell me that flex coupling is a primitive solution. They say it lacks elegance. Elegance doesn't keep the vacuum out, Brennan replied evenly. Structure integrity does. They also told me, Valindra continued, turning those amber eyes on him, that they would not have noticed the fracture until the pre-flight stress test, which would have been too late to repair without dry docking for a week. Brennan shrugged. Your guys look at the schematics. I look at the metal. Metal talks if you listen. Metal talks, Valindra repeated, testing the phrase. She sounded amused. And what does my ship say to you? Brennan Holt. It says it's tiring, Brennan said honestly. It says it has been pushed too hard on the last 3 jumps without a cooldown cycle. And it says the owner drives it like she stole it. Valindra's eyes widened slightly. Then, a sound escaped her. A short, sharp sound. It was a laugh. It was terrifying and beautiful all at once. It sounded like a purr mixed with a bark. I do not drive it like I stole it, she corrected, a hint of a smirk playing on her lips. I drive it like I command it, and it obeys. Well, physics negotiates, Brennan said. You have to give a little to get a little. He realized he was doing it again, talking back, treating her like a normal person. He braced himself for another death threat. But Valindra just looked at him. She looked past him, to the crate where Penny was sleeping. Is that the orphan? She asked. Ideally. Not yet, Brennan said, stepping slightly to block her view, his protective instinct flaring. That is my daughter, Penny. Where is the mother? Valindra asked. The question was blunt, intrusive. Gone, Brennan said shortly. Accident a long time ago. Valindra nodded slowly. She didn't offer sympathy. Kelvari didn't do pity, but her expression shifted. I lost my predecessors when I was young, she said. It was a shocking admission, dropped casually into the conversation. The galaxy is not kind to the small. No, Brennan agreed, his voice softening. It isn't. That is why we must be large, Valindra said. She looked back at him. Finish your work, mechanic, the coupling holding. My diagnostics confirm your green line. She turned to leave, but paused. And Holt. Yeah. You may look at me, she said. She didn't turn around. But do not stare. I meant what I said about spinach. She walked away, vanishing into the shadows of the exit corridor. Brennan stood there for a moment, baffled. He looked down at his oily hands. He looked at the ship. Did she just make a joke? He whispered to himself. He looked over at Penny. She shifted in her sleep, Mr. Sparks tumbling from her grasp. Brennan walked over and gently picked up the toy, tucking it back into her arms. "We are in trouble, kid," he murmured. "Big trouble." He didn't know it yet, but the coupling wasn't the only thing he had connected that day. He had connected himself to the most dangerous woman in the sector. And, unlike the engine part, there was no manual for this. Brennan picked up his wrench. He had a job to finish. And for the first time in a long time, the hangar didn't feel quite so cold. The repair schedule for the Imperial diplomatic cruiser was supposed to take 3 days. It had been 5. By all logical metrics, the ship was ready to fly. The flex coupling Brennan Holt had installed was holding perfectly, humming with a frequency that was technically more efficient than the original factory settings. The fuel lines were scrubbed, the containment fields were recalibrated. Even the aesthetic scratches on the port side, which Valindra had complained about, had been buffed out until the hull shone like a mirror made of void glass. Yet, Empress Valindra Soth Khan had not given the order to depart. Instead, she had developed a new habit, twice a day, at 0800 hours, and again at 1400 hours. She would descend from the upper command decks of the station into the grease-stained, noisy chaos of Hangar Bay 4. She claimed it was to supervise the final diagnostics. She claimed her engineers were incompetent, and she needed to ensure the insolent human was not replacing her hyperdrive with a steam engine. But Brennan knew better. The rest of the hangar crew knew better, though they were too terrified to say it out loud. She was bored, and she was fascinated. Brennan was currently waist-deep in the secondary exhaust manifold, tightening a valve that didn't really need tightening, mostly to look busy. He could feel her presence before he saw her. It was a change in the air pressure, a silence that rippled outward from the main blast doors as mechanics dropped their tools and pressed themselves against the walls to make way. "Daddy," Penny's voice piped up from her usual spot on the shipping crate. "The Queen is back. She is wearing a blue cape today. It looks like the ocean." "Blue cape means diplomatic immunity," Brennan muttered to himself, wiping a smudge of coolant from his cheek. "Or maybe it just means it is Tuesday." He pulled himself out of the manifold and wiped his hands on a rag. Sure enough, Valindra was standing at the edge of the designated safety zone. Her posture was impeccable. Her hands clasped behind her back. She was watching him. She wasn't scowling, which was an improvement from day one. Her expression was something more dangerous, intense curiosity. Brennan sighed and walked over. Stopping at the respectful distance, he had learned to gauge close enough to talk, far enough to avoid being slashed if she decided to extend her claws. "Your Majesty," Brennan said, nodding. "The manifold is clean. We are running the final simulation on the navigation array now. You could launch by dinner." "I am in no rush," Valindra said smoothly. Her voice carried over the din of the hangar. "The diplomatic summit has been delayed by 24 hours due to a solar flare in the Agni sector. I have time to ensure my vessel is perfect." "It is perfect," Brennan said. "It is the prettiest thing in this sector. I even waxed the landing struts." Valindra's amber eyes flickered toward the crate where Penny sat. The little girl was holding Mr. Sparks up to the light, inspecting a loose thread on the bear's ear. "You bring the child to a heavy industrial zone every day," Valindra observed. "Is this human custom to expose offspring to toxic fumes and heavy machinery?" "It is the custom of single dads who cannot afford the station's daycare center," Brennan replied, without missing a beat. "Besides, she learns things. Penny, tell the Empress what the combustion chamber does." Penny looked up, her eyes wide. She scrambled off the crate, clutching her bear. She walked right up to the line where Valindra stood. The royal guards flanking the Empress tensed, their hands twitching toward their shock batons. Valindra raised a single finger, and the guards froze. "The combustion chamber is the dragon's tummy," Penny announced seriously. Valindra blinked. "I beg your pardon." "It is the dragon's tummy," Penny repeated, gesturing at the massive engine block. "Daddy says the ship eats the star fuel, and the dragon inside gets a tummy ache, and when it burps, the ship goes fast." Brennan rubbed the back of his neck, looking slightly embarrassed. I simplify the thermodynamics. It keeps her interested. Valindra looked from the child to the mechanic. A corner of her lip twitched. A dragon's stomach. That is an inventive interpretation of fusion physics. It makes sense, Penny insisted. She looked up at Valindra, tilting her head back to see the Empress's face. Are you a dragon? The hanger went silent. Jarek, the foreman, looked like he was about to have a stroke in the corner. Valindra looked down. She was used to subjects trembling. She was used to diplomats sweating. She was not used to a 3-foot-tall human looking at her with absolute, unadulterated wonder. No, child, Valindra said, her voice surprisingly soft, though still regal. I am Kelvari. You look like a cat, Penny said. A big, fancy cat. Brennan stepped forward quickly. Penny, we talked about personal comments. But she does, Penny argued. She has ears. Look. She pointed a small finger at Valindra's ears, which were currently swiveled forward in attentiveness. Can you hear a mouse sneeze? Valindra crouched. It was a movement of fluid grace, the heavy fabric of her cape pooling around her boots like liquid sapphire. She brought her face down to Penny's level. I can hear a heartbeat from across the room, Valindra whispered. I can hear a lie before it leaves a throat. And yes, if a mouse sneezed, I would know. Penny gasped, delighted rather than scared. Do you eat mice? Brennan closed his eyes. Here it comes, the execution. I eat empires, Valindra said. Penny thought about this for a moment. Do they taste good? Mr. Sparks likes nutrient paste, but I think it tastes like wet cardboard. Valindra let out a short, sharp breath that might have been a laugh. Empires are often dry and dusty, but necessary. She stood up, towering over them once again. She looked at Brennan. You tell her stories of dragons and magic to explain machines. Why? Because the world is scary enough, Brennan said quietly, his voice low so Penny wouldn't hear. Understanding how a fusion drive works won't make her happy, but imagining a dragon makes the noise less frightening when she tries to sleep in the back office. Valindra studied him. For a moment, the alien distance between them vanished. She saw the fatigue etched into the lines around his eyes. She saw the grease under his fingernails that never quite washed away. She saw a male protecting his cub with the only weapons he had: imagination and a wrench. You are a strange creature, Brennan Holt, she murmured. Finish your checks. I will return tomorrow. As she swept out of the hangar, Penny waved. Bye, Cat Queen. Valindra did not turn, but Brennan saw her tail hidden beneath the cape give a distinct, rhythmic flick. She had heard it, and she hadn't executed anyone. That night, in the luxurious silence of her quarters on the upper deck, Empress Valindra Soth Khan could not sleep. Her quarters were a masterpiece of Kelvari aesthetics, dark stone, running water, and bioluminescent plants that cast a soft purple glow. It was beautiful. It was silent. It was incredibly lonely. She sat at her desk, a holographic interface shimmering in the air before her. On the screen was a personnel file. Subject Brennan Holt. Species human. Occupation Class A mechanic. Current status indentured contractor. Kelvari Station. Valindra swiped through the mundane details of his current life wage garnishments. Rent payments. A few citations for unauthorized modification of station ventilation. He had rerouted heat to the orphan ward during a winter cycle. Then she reached the history section, the classified section. Valindra had security clearances that overrode local encryptions. She opened the file marked Colony 42, Reactor Incident, 7 years ago. She read, and as she read, her golden eyes widened. Brennan was not just a mechanic. 7 years ago, he had been the youngest chief engineer in the sector, when the tectonic stabilizers on Colony 42 failed, threatening to crack the planet's crust and vent the fusion core. The evacuation ships had malfunctioned. The report was dry, military text. But the story it told was horrific. The core was going critical. Someone had to stay behind to manually cycle the coolant pumps, keeping the reactor stable long enough for the shuttles to launch. Brennan Holt had stayed. He had spent 4 hours inside a chamber flooded with hard radiation, manually cranking valves, while his skin burned and his cells shredded. He had bought enough time to save 2,000 colonists. One of those colonists was his wife. She had died of injuries on the shuttle. The infant daughter, Penny, had survived. The medical addendum at the bottom of the file was brutal in its brevity. Diagnosis: acute cellular degradation due to radiation exposure. Prognosis: irreversible. Lung capacity diminishing. Estimated remaining lifespan 2 to 3 years, without advanced intervention. Subject refuses palliative care in favor of continued work. Valindra sat back in her chair. The silence of her room felt heavier now. She thought of his sarcasm. "If you kill me, my daughter will have to sit outside the airlock." She thought of the way he wiped the dirt from Penny's face. He wasn't brave because he was stupid. He wasn't insolent because he didn't know who she was. He was fearless because he was already a dead man walking. He had stared into the heart of a melting reactor. Staring at an empress held no terror for him. "He is dying," Valindra whispered to the empty room. She looked at her own hands, tipped with retractable claws. She was powerful. She commanded fleets. She had access to the Kelvari rejuvenation chambers, technology that could rebuild DNA strand by strand. But those chambers were sacred. Only Kelvari citizens, those of the blood, were permitted entry. It was the law. It was the foundation of their hierarchy. To put a human, a mechanic, into a rejuvenation chamber would be political suicide. The council would riot. She closed the file. But the image of Brennan standing between her and his daughter refused to fade. The next day, chaos arrived at Hangar Bay 4. It started as a routine test. Brennan was up on the gantry, 30 feet above the ground, monitoring the flow regulators. Penny was below, sitting in her usual safety zone near the tool benches, drawing a picture of Mr. Sparks fighting a space squid. Valindra was there, of course. She was standing near the forward landing gear, ostensibly inspecting a hydraulic seal, but mostly listening to the hum of the ship. "Power cycling in 3, 2, 1. Brennan's voice came over the comms. The ship's engines whined. A soft blue glow illuminated the hangar. Then something snapped. It wasn't the ship. It was the station's power grid. A surge from the main reactor, completely unrelated to Brennan's work, spiked through the lines. The transformer box on the hangar ceiling exploded in a shower of sparks. "Cut the power!" Brennan screamed, slamming the emergency shutoff. The lights died. The emergency red strobes began to pulse. But the damage was done. The explosion had sheared the bolts holding a massive overhead cargo crane. With a groan of twisting metal, a 2-ton steel beam broke loose from the ceiling. It fell directly toward the tool benches, toward Penny. "Penny!" Brennan's scream tore his throat. He slammed his hand on his belt, activating the emergency gravity dampeners in his boots. He vaulted over the railing. It was a 30-foot drop. The dampeners whined, absorbing the crushing impact. But the shock still rattled his failing lungs. He scrambled up, forcing his legs to sprint toward his daughter. But he was too far away. The beam was falling. He could see Penny looking up, frozen, her eyes wide with terror, clutching her bear. Time seemed to slow down. Brennan reached out, as if his hand could bridge the 20 feet between them. He knew he wouldn't make it. He was going to watch his daughter die. Then, a blur of violet motion. It was faster than human eyes could track. One moment, Valindra was by the ship. The next, she was there. She didn't try to grab Penny and run. There wasn't time. Instead, she threw herself over the child. Valindra slammed to her knees, curling her body around Penny, her back to the falling debris. She flared her cape, which Brennan now realized was not just fabric, but a weave of ballistic micromesh armor. Crash! The steel beam slammed into Valindra's back. The sound was sickening heavy metal, hitting armored bone. The floor plates buckled under the impact. Dust billowed up in a choking cloud. "No!" Brennan skidded to a halt, falling to his knees beside the pile of debris. "Penny!" For a second, there was silence. Then, a low, strained hiss. The steel beam shifted. Valindra, teeth gritted, veins bulging in her neck, pushed upward, with a display of strength that defied physics. She shoved the 2-ton beam aside, letting it clang onto the floor. She was still crouched over Penny. Her cape was torn. Her ceremonial armor was dented. A trickle of violet blood ran down her forehead, where a shard of glass had struck her. She lowered her arms. Penny was huddled against her chest, completely unharmed, buried in the folds of the Empress's scent and silk. Penny looked up, trembling. She saw Valindra's face, fierce, pained, eyes glowing like dual suns. "Cat Queen," Penny whispered. Valindra let out a breath that was half growl, half sigh. "I have you, little one. You are safe." Penny didn't pull away. She threw her arms around Valindra's neck and buried her face in the Empress's shoulder, sobbing. Valindra stiffened. Physical contact with lower species was forbidden. It was unclean. But she didn't push the child away. Slowly, hesitantly. A gloved hand came up and rested on the back of Penny's head. Her claws were fully retracted. "Hush," Valindra commanded softly. "A warrior does not cry after the battle is won." Brennan crawled over to them. He was shaking. His face was pale as a sheet. He reached out and touched Penny's arm, verifying she was real. She was whole. "She is fine," Valindra said, looking at him. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were tight with pain. The beam did not touch her. "You," Brennan stared at Valindra. He looked at the dent in her armor. He looked at the violet blood. "You took the hit." "My exoskeleton is denser than your structural steel," Valindra dismissed. Trying to stand, she stumbled slightly. Brennan moved instantly, grabbing her elbow to steady her. For a second, he thought she would strike him for touching her. Instead, she leaned into his grip, just for a heartbeat. "Thank you," Brennan choked out. Tears were streaming down his face, cutting through the grime. "Oh God, thank you." Then, the adrenaline crash hit him. Brennan's chest seized. The sprint, the jump, the terror, it was too much for his damaged lungs. He doubled over, a coughing fit racking his body. It wasn't a normal cough. It was a wet, tearing sound. He covered his mouth with his hand. When he pulled it away, his palm was coated in bright, frothy red blood. "Daddy!" Penny cried out, pulling away from Valindra. Brennan tried to hide it. He wiped his hand on his pants, forcing a smile. "I'm okay, just dust. Swallowed some dust." But Valindra was watching. Her enhanced vision zoomed in on the blood. She smelled the iron and the decay in his breath. She saw the tremor in his hands. She grabbed his wrist. Her grip was like a vice. She turned his hand over, revealing the blood he tried to hide. "You are not okay," she said. Her voice was low and dangerous. "It happens," Brennan wheezed, trying to pull away. "Old injury. I just need to sit down." "You are dying," Valindra stated. It wasn't a question. Penny froze. "Dying?" Brennan glared at Valindra. "Don't! Not in front of her." Valindra ignored him. She turned to her guards, who were rushing over to check on their empress. "Call the medical transport," she barked. "Now, and summon the chief medical officer, not the station medic. I want my ship's surgeon." "No," Brennan rasped. "I can't afford—" "Silence," Valindra roared. The sound echoed off the walls. A true predator's command. "You do not get to argue with me today. Brennan Holt, you saved my ship. I saved your spawn. We are even. Now you will obey." The medical bay on the Kelvari ship was like a cathedral of glass and light. It smelled of ozone and crushed herbs, not antiseptic. Brennan lay on a biobed, shirtless. Sensors hovered over his chest, projecting a holographic map of his lungs. It was an ugly map. Large patches of black necrotic tissue were visible among the healthy pink. Penny was sitting on a chair in the corner, clutching Mr. Sparks. She had stopped crying, but she looked very small. A Kelvari nurse was showing her how to make an origami bird, keeping her distracted. Valindra stood by the biobed. She had removed her damaged armor and was wearing a simple silk tunic. The cut on her forehead had already sealed. Her regenerative abilities were working. Dr. Harkin, the ship's surgeon, looked nervous. He kept glancing between the hologram and the Empress. "Report," Valindra said. It is extensive, Your Majesty, Dr. Harkin said quietly. Radiation sclerosis, stage 4. His lung tissue is crystallizing. The fact that he is still breathing, let alone working manual labor, is a statistical anomaly. How long? Valindra asked. 6 months, the doctor said. Maybe less if he exerts himself like he did today. Brennan stared at the ceiling. He didn't look surprised. He just looked tired. Leave us, Valindra commanded. Dr. Harkin bowed and retreated. Valindra signaled the nurse to take Penny into the adjoining room for snacks. Penny looked at Brennan. He gave her a weak thumbs up. She hesitated, then followed the nurse. When the door slid shut, the silence in the room was deafening. You knew, Valindra said. She walked to the side of the bed. I knew, Brennan admitted. His voice was raspy. I was there when the reactor blew. Remember? I read the file, Valindra said. Colony 42. You were a hero. I was a guy doing his job, Brennan corrected. A hero saves everyone. I didn't save my wife. You saved the child. Yeah. And now I am going to leave her alone anyway. Brennan closed his eyes. A single tear leaked out. That is the joke. I fought so hard to keep her alive. And now, I am going to bail on her before she finishes elementary school. Valindra felt a spike of anger, not at him, but at the situation. It felt offensive to her sense of order. Why did you not seek treatment? She demanded. There are clinics. For humans, on a station wage. Brennan laughed bitterly. The pills I take cost half my paycheck. The surgery to fix this that costs more than the station itself. I am not royalty, Valindra. I am just a mechanic. It was the first time he had used her name without a title. It hung in the air. Valindra looked at the holographic display of his dying lungs. She knew, with absolute certainty, that a session in the Kelvari rejuvenation chamber could reverse this. It could flush the radiation, stimulate stem cell regrowth, and give him 50 more years. But the law, the Blood Purity Act, no non-Kelvari had ever entered the chamber. To authorize it would be a violation of her coronation oath. I could order you to stop working, she said. I could give you credits. You could rest for the time you have left. Brennan opened his eyes and looked at her. And do what sit around waiting to die, watching Penny watch me fade away? No thanks. I would rather work until I drop. At least that way I am useful. He sat up slowly, wincing. He swung his legs over the side of the bed. Look, he said, meeting her gaze. You asked me once why I am not afraid of you. Valindra waited. This is why, Brennan gestured to his chest. The worst thing that can happen to me isn't your claws. It isn't your anger. It isn't even death. The worst thing is knowing that one day, very soon, Penny is going to wake up and I won't be there to make her breakfast. That is what terrifies me. Compared to that, you are just a woman with really cool ears and a bad temper. Valindra stared at him. She felt stripped bare. All her armor, all her titles, all her power, it meant nothing to this man. He saw right through it to the lonely creature underneath. She thought about her own mother, the great Empress Caliph. She remembered standing by her mother's deathbed, watching the light fade from those golden eyes, feeling the crushing weight of the universe settling on her own young shoulders. She remembered the terror of being left behind. Brennan was facing that terror not for himself, but for his daughter. You are a fool, Valindra said softly, but there was no venom in it. I am a dad, Brennan shrugged. Same thing. He tried to stand up, but his knees buckled. Valindra moved instantly, catching him. Her hands were strong, steadying him. He smelled of oil and old sweat, but also something else, something warm and resilient. Stay, she ordered. She guided him back onto the bed. You will stay here tonight. My medical equipment can at least ease the pain and oxygenate your blood better than your pills. I can't pay for... If you mention money again, I will have you ejected from the airlock, Valindra growled. Consider it payment for the flex coupling and for protecting my ship. She didn't say for being the only real person I have met in a decade. Brennan hesitated, then nodded. He lay back down. Can Penny stay? The child will sleep in the guest quarters next door. She will be safe. I will place a guard. Thank you, Valindra, he whispered. He closed his eyes, and within moments, the exhaustion claimed him. He slept. Valindra stood there for a long time. She watched the rise and fall of his chest. It was shallow, labored. She walked out of the room and into the corridor. Through the glass partition, she could see into the guest room. Penny was curled up on a velvet sofa, fast asleep. Mr. Sparks tucked under her chin. Valindra placed her hand against the glass. She was the Empress. She commanded 12 star systems. She had a fleet capable of leveling planets. She was the apex predator. And yet, she was powerless. She was letting a good man die because of a rule written 500 years ago by ancestors who had never met a human like Brennan Holt. What is the point? She whispered to her reflection in the glass. What is the point of being a queen if I cannot save one life? A low growl started in her throat. It wasn't a growl of aggression. It was a growl of determination. She turned and walked down the corridor toward the bridge. Her stride was long and purposeful. Her cape snapped behind her like a declaration of war. She wasn't going to accept this. She was Valindra Soth Khan. She didn't follow the rules. She made them. If the universe wanted to take Brennan Holt away, the universe was going to have to go through her first. The inciting incident was over. The conflict had begun. And for the first time in Kelvari history, the Queen was about to declare war on her own laws. The morning of the departure was deceptively calm. Hangar Bay 4 smelled of ozone, polished ceramic, and the stale, recycled air of the station. But beneath that industrial scent lay the sharp tang of anticipation. The Shadow's Edge. Empress Valindra's diplomatic cruiser sat on the launch pad like a beast waiting to be unleashed. It was gleaming. The hull plating had been buffed to a mirror shine that reflected the harsh overhead lights. The landing struts were locked, the fuel lines were primed, and the navigation computer was humming with the coordinates for the Agni sector. To the casual observer, it was a picture of perfection. To the team of Kelvari engineers standing in a disciplined row by the gangway, it was a job well done. Their data pads all showed the same comforting word in glowing green text: optimal. Brennan Holt stood apart from them. He was standing near the rear exhaust port, his own data pad in hand. He was not looking at green text. He was looking at a jagged, oscillating red line that danced across his screen like a nervous heartbeat. "It is not right," Brennan muttered. He tapped the screen, zoomed in, and ran the algorithm again. The result was the same. Holt, Jarek, the station foreman, bustled over. He was sweating, despite the climate control. "Why are you not in line? The Empress is descending in 10 minutes. We need to present the ship." "The harmonic resonance in the tertiary coil is off," Brennan said, not looking up. "It is drifting. 0.04% variance." Jarek rolled his eyes. 0.04. "We are aware of the variance, human. But Kelvari biometal is designed to self-correct deviations up to 1%. Your concern is primitive. Our master engineers signed off on it because our ships are not built with your fragile earth metals. Do not cause trouble." "It is not a ghost," Brennan insisted. He looked at the massive engine thruster towering above him. He didn't just see a machine, he felt it. He had spent the last week with his hands inside its guts. He knew its rhythm. And right now, the ship felt brittle. The vibration from the jump drive is feeding back into the coil. If she initiates a high-energy jump, that variance won't stay at 0.04. It will spike to 40. And then the containment seal cracks. "Brennan," Jarek's voice dropped to a desperate whisper. "Listen to me. We are paid. The job is done. The Empress is eager to leave for this festival. If you delay her now, with a hunch about a decimal point, she will not just fire you. She will blacklist this entire station. We all have families to feed." Brennan looked at Jarek. He looked at the line of proud Kelvari engineers. Then he looked over at the safety zone, where Penny was sitting with Torvin, his Kelvari friend. Torvin was showing Penny a card trick, and she was laughing, clutching Mr. Sparks. If the ship exploded in the hangar, the blast radius would vaporize the safety zone. If it exploded in orbit, it would kill everyone on board. "I can't sign it," Brennan said. "Then don't," Jarek hissed. "I already signed it for the station. Just shut up and stand in line." At that moment, the main blast doors hissed open. The atmosphere in the hangar shifted instantly from busy to terrified. Empress Valindra Soth Khan swept into the room. She was wearing ceremonial robes of deep indigo and silver, a high collar framing her sharp features. A diadem of crystalline metal rested on her brow. She looked every inch the ruler of 12 systems regal, impatient, and utterly terrifying. Her entourage followed guards, advisors, and her chief engineer, a tall Kilvari named Kalen, who looked at the human mechanics with open disdain. Valindra stopped at the base of the ramp. Her golden eyes swept over the ship, then over the crew. "Is my vessel prepared?" she asked. Her voice was cool, carrying effortlessly to the back of the room. "It is, Your Majesty." Kalen stepped forward, bowing low. "All systems are green. The efficiency is 100%. We are ready to depart for the unification rite immediately." Valindra nodded, a rare expression of satisfaction crossing her face. "Excellent. We are on a tight schedule. The rite begins at sunset on the homeworld. I will not be late." She moved toward the ramp. The hangar crew exhaled. Jarek wiped his forehead. "Wait." The word hung in the air like a dropped wrench. Valindra froze. She turned slowly. Her eyes narrowed as they landed on Brennan, who had stepped out of the line. "Brennan!" Jarek hissed, reaching out to grab his arm. But Brennan pulled away. Brennan walked forward. He felt like he was walking to his execution, his knees shaking slightly, but his hands gripping the datapad were steady. He stopped 5 feet from the Empress. "You cannot fly this ship," Brennan said. The silence that followed was absolute. Kalen, the chief engineer, bristled, his ears flattening against his skull. "How dare you?" Kalen snarled. "You are a grease monkey, human. I have certified this ship myself." "You certified the static load," Brennan countered, ignoring the angry Kilvari and looking straight at Valindra. "You didn't account for the thermal expansion in the new coupling during a jump. Look." He held out the datapad. Valindra did not look at the pad. She looked at Brennan. Her jaw tightened. "Holt," she said, her voice dropping to that dangerous, low register. "I have just spent 3 hours in a council meeting listening to politicians tell me what I cannot do. I am not in the mood to hear it from my mechanic. My engineers say it is safe." "Your engineers are afraid of you," Brennan said. It was the truth, naked and brutal. "They tell you what you want to hear so you don't growl at them. I am telling you about physics, and physics doesn't care about your schedule. The unification rite is not just a schedule," Valindra snapped, her composure cracking. "It is the binding oath of my people. If I am absent, it signals weakness. It signals division. I will not delay a launch based on 0.04% variance." "If you launch," Brennan said, his voice rising, "you won't be absent because you are late. You will be absent because you are dead. That variance will shatter the containment field the second you hit light speed." "Enough!" Kalen shouted. "He is lying, Your Majesty. He seeks to prolong the contract to extort more credits. I will prove it." Kalen turned to his team. "Initiate the Tier 1 engine test. Full power to the thrusters. We will show this human that Kilvari engineering is flawless." "No," Brennan yelled. "Don't cycle it hot while stationary. The heat sinks aren't—" "Do it," Kalen commanded. Valindra did not stop him. She stood there. Her pride stung. Watching Brennan, she wanted him to be wrong. She needed to leave. A technician on the bridge received the remote command. The massive engines of the Shadow's Edge began to glow. A deep, thrumming vibration shook the floor plates. Whirr thump! The sound started low and rose quickly to a deafening scream. The blue ion glow from the thrusters turned blinding white. Brennan looked at his datapad. The red line spiked. "Abort!" Brennan screamed, running toward the control console near the landing gear. "Shut it down! Hold your position, Kalen ordered the guards. Two of them stepped in front of Brennan, blocking him with crossed pikes. Get out of my way, Brennan roared, shoving a 7-foot-tall alien guard. It was like shoving a brick wall. But his desperation gave him strength. Look at the thermal gauge, it is spiking. Valindra looked at the datapad in Kalen's hand. The chief engineer was smiling smugly. But then, his smile faltered. The green light on his pad flickered. It turned yellow, then red. A loud crack echoed through the hangar, the sound of metal screaming under torture. Steam erupted from the side of the ship's engine casing. A bolt the size of a fist shot out like a bullet, embedding itself in the far wall, missing Jarek's head by inches. Stability is failing, a technician screamed from the bridge comms. Containment breach in Sector 4. The reaction is cascading. The vibration became violent. Tools danced off the tables. The floor lurched. Shut down! Kalen yelled, tapping his pad frantically. Emergency shutdown! It is not responding, the technician cried. The valve is jammed, energy output rising to critical. If the engine went critical here, inside the station, it wouldn't just be a fire. It would be a plasma detonation. It would take out the entire hangar deck. Penny, Brennan spun around. The safety zone. Because of the containment breach alarm. The station's automated safety protocols had kicked in. Massive. 3-foot-thick blast doors were descending from the ceiling to seal off the hangar bay from the rest of the station. But Penny and Torvin were in the observation alcove inside the hangar. The blast door to the safe corridor was closing. Torvin was trying to push Penny through, but the door was coming down too fast. Daddy! Penny screamed, her voice barely audible over the roar of the dying engine. Brennan made a choice. He didn't run for the door. He ran for the ship. Brennan, Valindra shouted, her eyes wide. The manual override is in the core, Brennan yelled back, not stopping. I have to divert the flow or we all burn. He ducked under the landing gear and scrambled up the service ladder, diving into the open maintenance hatch of the engine room, just as a jet of superheated steam hissed past his face. Valindra stood frozen for a fraction of a second. She looked at the ship, shaking violently. She looked at the blast door, which was 5 feet from the ground and dropping, threatening to seal Penny inside the kill zone. Torvin was struggling, but debris had fallen, blocking the child's path. Valindra moved. She didn't run. She launched herself. She crossed the hangar floor in a blur of indigo silk. She reached the blast door just as it was 3 feet from the floor. She didn't slide under it. She grabbed it. With a roar that was pure primal fury, Empress Valindra Soth Khan, daughter of the line of Kalith, slammed her hands under the falling wall of steel. Hold, she screamed. Her knees buckled under the crushing weight. The hydraulics of the door whined, fighting her. This door was designed to withstand a nuclear impact. It weighed tons. Valindra's boots cracked the concrete floor. The muscles in her arms bulged, tearing the sleeves of her ceremonial robe. Her exoskeleton groaned under the pressure. Go, she snarled at Torvin. Get her out. Torvin grabbed Penny, shoving her through the gap beneath Valindra's straining arms. No, Daddy. Penny was kicking, reaching back toward the ship. Daddy is in there. He is saving us, Torvin yelled, dragging her through to the corridor. Go. Inside the engine room, Brennan was in hell. The air was a solid wall of heat. Alarms were blaring a discordant screech. The central turbine was spinning so fast it was a blur, glowing a terrifying, angry violet. Come on, you piece of junk, Brennan coughed, shielding his eyes from the blinding light. He reached the manual override wheel. It was red hot. He didn't have his gloves. He had left them on the bench when he ran to confront Valindra. He grabbed the wheel anyway. The smell of burning skin hit his nose instantly. He screamed, a raw sound of agony. But he didn't let go. He hauled the wheel to the left, fighting the immense pressure of the hydraulic flow. Divert, he gritted out. His teeth clenched so hard he thought they would shatter. Divert to the auxiliary vents. The wheel wouldn't budge. The pressure was too high. Valindra, Brennan shouted, hoping the comm system was still active. Valindra, the release valve is stuck. I need you to cut the magnetic lock on the exterior port Sector 4. Outside. Valindra heard him through her earpiece. She was still holding the door, her vision blurring from the strain. "Kalen," she roared at her chief engineer, who was cowering behind a crate. "The magnetic lock Sector 4, shoot it." Kalen stared at her, paralyzed by fear. "Shoot it or I will gut you myself," Valindra bellowed. Kalen scrambled. He pulled his sidearm and fired at the control box on the side of the ship's hull. Zap. The lock shattered. Inside, the pressure on the wheel suddenly released. Brennan spun it. 1 turn, 2 turns, 3. "Venting," he gasped. A massive whoosh shook the station. The ship shuddered violently as the built-up plasma energy was diverted from the core and blasted out of the emergency vents, shooting harmlessly, but spectacularly, into the void of space outside the hangar. The blinding light in the engine room faded. The scream of the turbine wound down to a low, dying moan. Silence fell over Hangar Bay 4. Valindra let go of the blast door. It slammed shut with a deafening boom, sealing the corridor and Penny safely on the other side. She fell to her knees, gasping for air. Her arms were trembling uncontrollably. Her ceremonial robes were in tatters, covered in dust and hydraulic fluid. But she didn't rest. She scrambled up and ran toward the ship. "Brennan," she tore the maintenance hatch open. Smoke billowed out. It wasn't just smoke. It was the acrid, metallic taste of irradiated coolant. Brennan stumbled out of the smoke. He looked like a ghost. His face was gray, covered in soot. He was clutching his right hand against his chest. The hand that had turned the wheel was raw, blistered, and shaking. He took 2 steps toward her, tried to smile, and whispered, "Told you physics doesn't care." Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. No, Valindra caught him before he hit the floor. He was shockingly light. Or perhaps she was just full of adrenaline. She cradled his head in her lap. "Brennan, open your eyes." He coughed. A spray of blood hit her chest, staining the silver embroidery of her royal tunic. It was a lot of blood. "Get the medics!" Valindra screamed. She looked up at her guards, her eyes wild, glowing with a ferocity that made them recoil. Now, the scene in the station's infirmary was chaotic, but Valindra silenced it with her presence. She stood in the center of the trauma unit. She refused to leave. She refused to change her clothes. She stood there, covered in soot and human blood, watching the team of doctors work on the body on the table. Dr. Harkin, her ship's surgeon, came out of the sterile field. He pulled down his mask. His face was grim. "Your Majesty," he said softly. "Speak," Valindra commanded. Her voice was brittle. "The burns on his hands are severe, but treatable," Harkin said. "But the radiation spike from the core breach accelerated his condition. His lungs are failing, rapidly. The crystallized tissue has spread to 90% capacity. He is drowning in his own fluids." "Fix him," Valindra said. "I cannot." Harkin shook his head. "Standard therapy is useless at this stage. He has hours, maybe less." Valindra grabbed the doctor by the collar of his pristine white coat. "Do not tell me what you cannot do. You are the finest surgeon in the Dominion. Think." "There is one thing," Harkin stammered, his feet lifting off the ground as she hoisted him. "The cellular genesis protocol, the regenerative tank." "Then put him in it." "I cannot," Harkin cried. "The machine is keyed to Kelvari genetic markers. It rejects non-citizens. It is the law. Your Majesty. The Blood Purity Act of the Second Era forbids." "I am the law," Valindra threw him back. She marched over to the control console of the massive, glowing tank that stood in the corner of the room, a device reserved for high-ranking officers injured in battle. "Override the genetic lock," she ordered the technician at the console. The technician, a young Kelvari female, looked terrified. "Your Majesty, I cannot. The system requires a prime clearance code, and it requires the subject to be listed as a protected life form of the royal house. He is human. The system will not accept him." Valindra stared at the console. She looked back at Brennan. He was intubated, a machine breathing for him. He looked so small amidst the alien technology. She remembered his words. "The worst thing is knowing that one day Penny is going to wake up and I won't be there." She remembered him diving into the fire for her ship, for her crew. Valindra Sath Khan pulled a ceremonial dagger from her belt. It was a small blade, made of obsidian, used for ritual oaths. She walked to the bioscanner on the console. "Your Majesty," Harkin whispered, horrified. "What are you doing?" "Does the system require a genetic marker?" Valindra asked. She raised the dagger and sliced her own palm. A deep, clean cut. Violet blood welled up. She slammed her bleeding hand onto the DNA scanner. "Override authorization Empress Valindra Sath Khan," she stated, her voice ringing with power. "I hereby designate Brennan Holt as Kale Varn." The room gasped. Kale Varn. It meant bloodbound. It was an ancient, almost extinct title used for non-Kelvari, who were adopted into the royal house. It granted full citizenship. It granted absolute protection. "Update the registry," Valindra snarled at the computer interface. "The subject is under my direct protection. The subject is family." The console beeped. A red warning flashed. "Warning. Designation of non-Kelvari violates the Blood Pact. Penalty immediate invocation of council judgment and potential forfeiture of the crown. Proceed." Valindra didn't hesitate. "Proceed," she commanded. Identity confirmed. Genetic override accepted. The glass tank hissed open. "Put him in," Valindra whispered. Her energy was fading. The adrenaline crash finally hitting her. The medical team moved instantly. They lifted Brennan's limp body and lowered him into the tank. The golden, viscous liquid rose, covering him. The lights on the machine turned from red to a soothing, pulsing blue. Harkin checked the monitors. "Cellular regeneration initiated. The nanites are bonding. It is working." Valindra watched Brennan float in the golden suspension. His chest rose and fell, rhythmically, supported by the fluid. The pained expression on his face smoothed out. She let out a breath she felt she had been holding for hours. The door to the infirmary slid open. Torvin stood there, holding Penny. Penny's face was streaked with tears. She saw Valindra bloody, torn, terrifying. She hesitated. Valindra turned. She didn't hide the blood on her hands. She didn't hide the tears in her own eyes. "Is my daddy dead?" Penny asked, her voice a tiny, broken squeak. Valindra walked over. She knelt down, ignoring the pain in her bruised knees. She put her clean hand on Penny's shoulder. "No, little one," Valindra said fiercely. "He is not dead. He is sleeping in the dragon's egg." She pointed to the glowing tank. "When he wakes up, he will be strong again. I promise you." Penny looked at the tank, then back at Valindra. She dropped Mr. Sparks and threw her arms around the Empress's neck. "Thank you, Cat Queen," she sobbed. Valindra closed her eyes, resting her cheek against the child's hair. She felt a strange sensation in her chest. It wasn't the pride of ruling. It wasn't the thrill of victory. It was fear. For the first time in her life, she realized that having power didn't mean you were safe. It just meant you had more to lose. She looked over Penny's shoulder at Brennan, floating in the light. "I broke the law for you," she thought. "I defied the ancestors for you. You had better wake up, Brennan Holt. Or I will come into the afterlife and drag you back myself." She stood up, signaling Torvin to take Penny to the guest quarters. "Guard them," Valindra ordered, "with your life." "Yes, Majesty," Torvin bowed, looking at her with a new kind of awe, not fear, respect. When they were gone, Valindra remained alone in the medical bay. She leaned her forehead against the cool glass of the tank. Her reflection stared back disheveled, bloody, undone. She didn't recognize herself. The aloof, perfect Empress was gone. In her place was a woman who had just realized she was in love with a dying mechanic, and she had torn the universe apart to keep him. "You win," she whispered to the sleeping man. "You were right. The physics of the heart does not negotiate." Outside, the stars of the Agni sector waited. The unification rite would start in 12 hours. She would be late. She didn't care. For the first time, she was exactly where she needed to be. The tank was a world of gold and silence. For the first week, Brennan Holt knew nothing but the viscosity of the regeneration fluid. It was warm, thicker than water, and smelled faintly of ozone and crushed lavender. He floated in a state of suspended animation, a place where gravity did not exist, and pain was a distant memory. He did not sleep, not in the human sense. He drifted. In the drift, memories fragmented and reformed like oil on water. He saw the reactor on Colony 42, glowing and angry, radioactive blue. He felt the heat blistering his skin. Then, the image would shift. He saw his wife's smile, but it was blurry, fading like old holofilm. Then he saw Penny, small and crying, holding a bear that was missing an eye. And then, he saw eyes, giant, amber eyes with vertical slit pupils. They were terrifying. They were beautiful. They were watching him through the gold. Sometimes, when he drifted closer to consciousness, he could hear voices vibrating through the glass of the tank. Cellular reconstruction is at 80%. The lung tissue is knitting faster than anticipated. That was a male voice. Nervous. Dr. Harkin. Keep him under. I do not want him to feel the bone density recalibration. That was her. The voice was like a cello string being plucked in a cavern. Low, resonant, commanding. Weeks passed. Or perhaps it was days. Time had no meaning inside the golden womb. When Brennan finally opened his eyes for real, the fluid was draining. The golden light receded, replaced by the sterile white of the medical bay. Gravity returned with a vengeance, pulling at his limbs, making him feel heavy and weak. The glass hissed open. He took a breath. He braced himself for the familiar catch, the rasp, the sensation of broken glass in his chest that had been his constant companion for 7 years. It didn't come. The air rushed in, cool and sweet. It filled his lungs completely, expanding into corners that had been dead and necrotic since the accident. He exhaled. No wheeze, no blood. Welcome back to the land of the living, Grease Monkey. Brennan blinked, wiping the residual fluid from his eyelashes. Standing at the foot of the tank, arms crossed, wearing a casual tunic of deep violet silk rather than her armor, was Empress Valindra. She looked tired. There were faint shadows under those luminescent eyes, but she was smiling a very small, very sharp smile. You have been pickling in there for 3 weeks, she said. You look like a prune. Brennan tried to laugh, but it came out as a croak. You really know how to charm a guy, Your Majesty. Daddy! A small projectile launched itself from the corner of the room. Penny scrambled up the side of the biobed before the nurses could stop her. She threw her arms around Brennan's damp neck, burying her face in his shoulder. You were sleeping so long, Penny sobbed. Mr. Sparks was worried. Brennan held her. He buried his nose in her hair, smelling the familiar scent of shampoo and engine grease. He held her tight, testing his new strength. He didn't cough. He didn't faint. I am okay, Sweet Pea, he whispered, his voice gaining strength. I am okay. He looked up over Penny's head. Valindra was watching them. She wasn't looking at him with the cold assessment of a ruler anymore. She was looking at them with a strange softness, a longing that she quickly hid behind a mask of indifference when she caught him looking. Get him a robe, Valindra ordered the nearest nurse. And get him food. Real food. Not the nutrient paste. If he dies of starvation after I spent a fortune fixing his lungs, I will be very annoyed. The recovery process was slow, not because Brennan was sick, but because his body had to relearn how to be healthy. He was moved to a private recovery suite on the Shadow's edge. It was nicer than any apartment he had ever lived in. The walls were lined with soft synthetic velvet, and the viewport looked out over the glittering expanse of the Kelvari station and the star field beyond. Outside the ship, the station was buzzing. The gossip mill was running hotter than a fusion drive. The story had spread. The Cat Queen had missed the unification rite. She had stayed docked for a month to oversee the medical treatment of a human mechanic. The political fallout was immense. Kelvari diplomats were pacing the station corridors, wringing their hands, whispering about scandal and blood purity. But among the station workers, the dock hands, the cargo haulers, the bartenders, Brennan had become a folk hero, and Valindra, she had become something even more terrifying, a legend. They are selling t-shirts, Torvin told Brennan one afternoon. Torvin was visiting, sitting by the bed while Brennan practiced grip strength exercises. T-shirts, Brennan asked, squeezing a rubber ball. Yeah, it has a picture of the Empress holding up a blast door. The caption says, "She breaks things so he can fix them." It is being sold out at the gift shop. Brennan groaned, covering his face with his hands. Please tell me you didn't buy one. I bought two, Torvin grinned. One for me, one for Penny. Speaking of Penny, she had adapted to life on the Royal Cruiser with frightening ease. She had turned the high-security diplomatic vessel into her personal playground. The Royal Guards, 7-foot-tall warriors trained to kill with their thumbs, had been reduced to glorified babysitters. They followed her around, ensuring she didn't open airlocks or eat anything strange. And Brennan swore he saw one of them letting her braid the fur on his wrist. But the center of this strange new orbit was Valindra. She came every evening. At first, she claimed it was to review the repair logs. She would stand on the other side of the glass partition before he was cleared for contact, holding a data pad, asking technical questions about the flux capacitors and thermal vents. The starboard stabilizer is showing a .02 deviation, she would say, not looking at him. That is within tolerance, Brennan would reply, leaning against the glass. Stop worrying about the ship, Valindra. The ship is fine. How are you? She would pause, her ears twitching. I am functioning within normal parameters. Liar, Brennan would smile. You look like you haven't slept in a week. Are the diplomats giving you hell? They are vocal, she admitted, finally looking at him. They say I have abandoned tradition. They say I have prioritized a single life over the destiny of the Empire. Maybe they are right, Brennan said softly. You missed your big party. It was a right, she corrected. And no, they are not right. She placed her hand against the glass, aligning it with his hand on the other side. Tradition that demands I let a good man die is not tradition. It is cowardice to wear a fancy hat. As Brennan got stronger, the glass partition came down. The visits became longer. The pretense of ship business evaporated. One evening, Brennan was sitting up in the lounge area of his suite. It was late, the station lights twinkling outside like a city of jewels. He had managed to procure a packet of instant cocoa powder from the station commissary, a small comfort from home. He was stirring 2 mugs when the door chimed. Enter, he called. Valindra walked in. She had abandoned the heavy robes entirely in these private hours. She wore a simple tunic and trousers, her feet bare on the carpeted floor. It was intimate in a way that made Brennan's heart do a stupid little flip in his chest. I smell chemicals, Valindra noted, sniffing the air. It is chocolate, Brennan corrected. Well, synthetic chocolate flavor number 4. Want some? He held out the second mug. Valindra eyed the steaming brown liquid with suspicion. It is black and sludge-like. Is this engine oil? Try it, Brennan urged. It is sweet. It releases endorphins. You look like you could use some endorphins. She took the mug. Her claws clicked softly against the ceramic. She brought it to her nose, sniffed, and then took a tiny, tentative sip. Her eyes went wide. Her ears swiveled back. It is thick, she said, licking a smudge of foam from her upper lip. Is that a good thick or a bad thick? It is acceptable, she decided, taking another, larger sip. She walked over to the viewport and sat down on the wide ledge, tucking her legs under her. It tastes like comfort. Brennan sat opposite her. So, the diplomats finally went to sleep. They are drafting a formal letter of complaint, Valindra sighed. I will use it to line the cage of my pet Razcat back home. You have a pet cat, Brennan grinned. Isn't that, I don't know, a little redundant? Valindra glared at him over the rim of her mug. A low, vibrating sound emanated from her chest. It was a growl, but it was soft, rhythmic. Brennan froze. Wait, are you purring? Kelvari do not purr, Valindra snapped, though the sound continued. It is a bioacoustic resonance indicating relaxation. Right, Brennan teased, leaning forward. And the ears? They twitch every time I make a joke. Is that a bioacoustic resonance too? My ears are highly sensitive radar dishes, she said haughtily. They are tracking the hum of the ventilation system. Uh-huh, and the tail? Valindra still went. She wasn't wearing a cape, for the first time. Brennan could clearly see the outline of a long, slender tail beneath the fabric of her trousers, wrapped distinctly around her ankle. I do not know what you are talking about, she said, taking a furious sip of cocoa. You are wagging it, Brennan pointed out. Just the tip. It is thumping against your ankle bone. If you mention the tail again, Valindra threatened, I will have you put back in the tank. You wouldn't, Brennan challenged. Who would make you cocoa? Valindra looked at him. The threat died in her eyes, replaced by a warmth that rivaled the heat of the mug in her hands. No, she whispered. I suppose I would miss the cocoa. The silence that stretched between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy with things unsaid. Brennan looked at her, this powerful, alien queen who could crush him with one hand, sitting barefoot in his room, drinking cheap chocolate and hiding her tail because she was embarrassed. He realized, with a sudden, terrifying clarity, that he wasn't just grateful to her, he was falling for her. Where is the goblin? Valindra asked, breaking the tension. Penny, she is asleep in the other room. Torvin read her a bedtime story about a space pirate who learns to share. Torvin is a good lieutenant, Valindra nodded. He has been promoted. Penny calls you your scary majesty now, Brennan said. I tried to stop her, but I like it, Valindra interrupted. A small smile played on her lips. It is accurate. I am scared, and I am majestic. She also says you are her best friend, Brennan added softly. Valindra looked down into her mug. She is a unique child. She does not see the teeth. She only sees the person. She takes after her dad that way, Brennan said. Valindra looked up. Their eyes met. For a moment. The air in the room felt charged, like the moment before a jump drive engages. Brennan, she began. Her voice was serious now. Yeah. Dr. Harkin finished his final analysis this morning. I wanted to tell you myself. Brennan put his mug down. His hands started to sweat. Okay, give it to me straight. Did the tank miss a spot? Do I have 3 months instead of 6? No. Valindra shook her head. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. The radiation is gone. Brennan, all of it. The cellular regeneration was 100% effective. Your lungs are pink. Your DNA has been scrubbed. Brennan stared at her. What? You are cured, she said firmly. You have the life expectancy of a healthy human male. Perhaps even longer, given the Kelvari enhancements in the serum. You are going to live, Brennan, for a very long time. Brennan sat back. He felt like he had been punched in the gut. He should be happy. He should be jumping for joy, but instead, he felt a wave of dizziness. I don't understand, he stammered. It is simple biology, Valindra said, confused by his reaction. Why do you look like you have seen a ghost? Because I have, Brennan stood up, pacing the small room. Valindra, you don't get it. I have spent 7 years dying. Every decision I made, every credit I saved, every job I took was based on the fact that I wouldn't be here to see Penny turn 18. I planned for an ending. I didn't plan for the future. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know how to be a person who lives. I only know how to be a person who is leaving. Valindra stood up. She crossed the room and stood in front of him. She reached out and took his hands. Her skin was cool, her grip strong. Then learn, she said fiercely. You are an engineer, Brennan Holt. You fix broken things. You fixed my ship. You fixed your lungs. Now fix your head. She squeezed his hands. I have a proposal, she said. Brennan looked at her. A proposal? My chief engineer, Kalen, has been reassigned to a garbage scow in the Outer Rim. It turns out he has a phobia of blast doors. Brennan snorted. Ouch! I need a new chief engineer, Valindra said. Someone who understands my ship. Someone who is not afraid to tell me when I am being an idiot about physics. Someone I can trust with my life. She took a breath. I am offering you the position, permanent commission. You would live on the shadow's edge. You would have a salary that is substantial. Valindra. And, she continued, her voice softening. Penny would be under royal protection. She would have the best tutors. She would see the galaxy. She would never have to sit in a crate in a hangar again. It was the perfect offer. It was everything he could ever want. And that was why he was terrified. "I can't," Brennan whispered. Valindra dropped his hands. She stepped back, looking as if he had slapped her. "You refuse." "It is not that I don't want it," Brennan pleaded. "God, Valindra, I want it. I want to be near you. But look at us. You are an empress. I am a grease monkey. If I join your crew, I become a pet, a novelty, the human that the queen kept." "I do not keep pets," Valindra hissed, her ears flattening. "I keep equals." "We aren't equals," Brennan shouted back. "We never will be. And what happens when the novelty wears off? What happens when your council decides that having a human around is too much of a liability? Do I just pack up Penny and leave? I can't do that to her. I can't give her a family and then rip it away." Valindra stared at him. Her amber eyes were burning, not with anger, but with analysis. She was dissecting him. "You are lying," she said quietly. "I am not." "You are lying to yourself," she interrupted. "You are not afraid of the council. You are not afraid of the job. You are afraid of being happy." She turned and walked to the desk in the corner of the room. She tapped a few commands into the terminal. A holographic file projected into the air. It was an old file, a communication log. "I did more digging," Valindra said, her back to him. "After the accident on Colony 42, you were listed as dead for 3 days before they found you in the wreckage." "Yeah," Brennan said, wary. So, in those 3 days, a relief ship arrived. It carried evacuees, including the parents of your late wife, Elena and Jared." Brennan went cold. He stopped pacing. "They looked for you," Valindra said, turning to face him. "They looked for Penny. But you had already checked yourself out of the field hospital. You took the first transport to the Outer Rim. You changed your ID codes. You vanished." "I did what I had to do," Brennan said, his voice tight. "They were old. They had just lost their daughter. If they had to watch me die, if they had to raise Penny knowing she was going to be an orphan twice over, it would have killed them." "So you decided for them," Valindra challenged. "You decided that their grief was too heavy. So you took their grandchild away." "I protected them," Brennan yelled. "I was a walking corpse. Valindra, I was radioactive, I was broke. I didn't want to drag them down with me." "That is not protection," Valindra said. Her voice was calm, brutal, and true. "That is running away." She walked closer to him. "You cut them off because you were ashamed," she said. "You were ashamed that you lived when their daughter died. You were ashamed that you were sick. You thought that if you suffered alone, it would somehow pay for the guilt of surviving." Brennan trembled. Tears pricked his eyes. She was tearing down the walls he had built for 7 years. "Stop it," he whispered. "No," Valindra said. "I know this look. Brennan, I know this fear. I pushed everyone away when my mother died. I built a wall of ice and called it strength. I told myself that a queen does not need comfort. But I was wrong. It was lonely. It was cold." She reached out and touched his face. Her claws were retracted, her fingertips soft against his rough cheek. "You are not dying anymore," she said. "The excuse is gone. You have a future now. But you cannot build a future on a foundation of lies. You cannot be my chief engineer. You cannot be the man I believe you are. If you are still running from the past." Brennan leaned into her hand. He closed his eyes. The truth washed over him, painful and liberating. She was right. He wasn't protecting Elena and Jared. He was hiding from them because he couldn't face their pain. He couldn't face the reminder of his wife. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice breaking. "You finish the job," Valindra said firmly. "You fix the connection." She handed him a data pad. "I have located them," she said. "They are living on a terraforming station in the sector capital. They are listed as next of kin on your old files. They never stopped looking for death certificates." Brennan looked at the data pad. He saw the names: Elena, Jared. If I call them, Brennan swallowed, they might hate me. I stole 7 years of their granddaughter's life. They might, Valindra agreed. Or they might love you for bringing her back. You will never know until you look them in the eye. Like you looked at me. Brennan took a deep breath. He looked at the data pad. Then he looked at Valindra. Will you stay? He asked. While I do it. I am not going anywhere, Valindra said. She sat on the edge of the bed, folding her hands in her lap. I am right here. Brennan sat down next to her. He didn't activate the real-time comms. He wasn't ready for that yet. He opened a text channel. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. His hands, which could fix a warp drive in a blizzard, were shaking. He typed, to Elena and Jared, from Brennan. Subject not dead. I am alive. Penny is alive. She is 7, and she looks like her mother. I am sorry. I was sick, and I was scared, and I thought I was doing the right thing by disappearing. I was wrong. I am at Kilvari Station. I am safe. I am healthy. If you want to see us. If you can forgive me, we are here. He stared at the message. It felt inadequate. It felt huge. Send it, Valindra whispered. Brennan hit send. The screen flashed, message transmitted. He slumped back, the adrenaline draining out of him. He felt lightheaded. Valindra put her arm around his shoulders. It was a hesitant gesture, awkward, but solid. She pulled him closer. He rested his head on her shoulder. The silk of her tunic was soft. She smelled of cinnamon and power. You did good, she murmured. I am terrified, Brennan admitted. Good, she said. Fear keeps you sharp, but you are not alone in the dark anymore. Brennan. They sat there for a long time, watching the station traffic outside the window. The silence wasn't lonely. It was the silence of a team. Valindra. Yes. If they come, they are going to freak out when they see you. Valindra chuckled. It was a low, throaty sound. Let them. I will wear my nice cape, and I will try not to growl. Try hard, Brennan advised. Elena has a mean right hook. She might take you. I would like to see her try, Valindra said, but her tone was amused. Brennan closed his eyes. He didn't know what the reply would be. He didn't know if he could really be the chief engineer for an alien empress. But for the first time in 7 years, he wasn't looking at a clock counting down to 0. He was looking at a blank page, and he had a pen. Hey, he whispered. What? Thanks for the cocoa. Shut up, mechanic, she said gently. And sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Brennan drifted off. But this time, he didn't dream of fire or hospitals. He dreamed of a garden. Penny was chasing a butterfly, and sitting on a bench, holding a mug of cocoa, was a woman with violet skin and cat ears, who looked at him and didn't look away. The door to the past was open, now. He just had to walk through it without tripping. The arrival gate of Kilvari Station was usually a place of indifference. Travelers came, travelers went, and the station swallowed them whole. But today, Docking Bay 7 felt different. The air recyclers seemed to be humming a little quieter, and the ambient noise of the crowd was hushed, dampened by the presence of the Royal Guard. Brennan Holt stood by the airlock. He was wearing his best tunic, a clean, dark blue mechanic's jumpsuit that Valindra had insisted was formal wear, because it didn't have any holes in it. He was sweating. His hands were trembling slightly, a tremor that had nothing to do with radiation sickness and everything to do with fear. Stop fidgeting, a voice murmured from the shadows of a structural pillar behind him. Brennan didn't turn. He knew she was there. Empress Valindra Soth Khan had insisted on accompanying him, though she had agreed to stay out of the direct line of sight for the first few minutes. She was wearing a hooded cloak over her royal attire, trying, and mostly failing, to look inconspicuous. I can't help it, Brennan whispered back. I would rather face a plasma leak. I would rather face you on a bad day. Your in-laws are elderly humans, not a warp core breach, Valindra noted dryly. Though, based on your heart rate monitor, which I can hear from here, you seem to think they are equally lethal. You don't know Elena, Brennan said. wiping his palms on his pants. She has a right hook that can dent titanium. Daddy. Penny tugged on his hand. She was wearing a little dress made of shimmering fabric that Torvin had found in the market. She looked terrified. Do they remember me? Brennan knelt down, ignoring the ache in his healing joints. They remember you, Sweet Pea. They remember you every day. The question is, are you ready to give them a chance? Penny nodded, clutching Mr. Sparks tightly. The bear had been patched up again, this time with a piece of royal purple silk over its missing eye. The airlock cycled. The heavy hiss of depressurization filled the bay. The lights turned from red to green. The doors slid open. A stream of passengers flowed out, merchants, drifters, exhaustion etched on their faces. And then, at the back of the line, two figures appeared. They looked older than Brennan remembered. Jared walked with a cane. His shoulders stooped, his hair completely white. Elena moved with a stiffness that spoke of arthritis, and too many years carrying heavy burdens. They looked small. They looked fragile. They looked like people who had been hollowed out by grief. Brennan felt his throat close up. He took a step forward. Elena, Jared. The couple stopped. They looked around, confused by the alien architecture, until their eyes landed on the man standing in the center of the bay. For a long moment, there was no sound. The galaxy seemed to stop spinning. Elena dropped the small bag she was holding. Her hands flew to her mouth. She took a step forward, squinting, as if she were seeing a ghost. Brennan, she whispered. Her voice was cracked, rusty. It is me, Brennan said. He held his hands out, palms up, a gesture of surrender. I am here. Elena walked toward him. She moved slowly at first, then faster. Her face was a mask of disbelief that crumpled into something fierce. Brennan braced himself. He expected a hug. He hoped for a hug. Smack. The sound of her hand connecting with his cheek echoed through the docking bay. It wasn't a playful tap. It was a slap fueled by 7 years of anger, sleepless nights, and mourning. Brennan didn't flinch. He took it. He deserved it. You bastard, Elena hissed, tears instantly spilling from her eyes. You selfish, stupid bastard. I know, Brennan said softly. We buried you, Jared shouted, hobbling forward, his cane clattering to the floor as he grabbed Brennan by the lapels of his jumpsuit. His grip was surprisingly strong, shaking Brennan back and forth. We put a stone in the ground with your name on it. We mourned you. We mourned her. I know, Brennan repeated, his own vision blurring. I am sorry, Jared, I am so sorry. Why? Elena sobbed, hitting his chest with her fists, weak, thudding blows that hurt Brennan's heart more than his body. Why did you do it? Why did you leave us alone? I was dying, Brennan choked out, grabbing her hands to stop her. I was radioactive, Elena. I was a walking corpse. I didn't want you to watch me rot. I didn't want Penny to watch me rot. So you decided for us, Jared roared, tears streaming down his weathered face. You decided we weren't strong enough. You stole our granddaughter because you were too proud to let us help you die. I wasn't proud, Brennan wept. I was scared. I was just scared. It was a mess. It was ugly, loud, and raw. It was the kind of human explosion that usually made the Kelvari uncomfortable. From the shadows, Valindra watched. She stood perfectly still, her hood pulled low. Her guards shifted uneasily, waiting for a command to intervene, to protect the consort designate from these aggressive seniors. But Valindra held up a hand, stopping them. She watched the pain. She watched the anger. And she realized she was witnessing something powerful. In the Kelvari court, betrayal was met with assassination. Anger was met with duels. Silence was the weapon of choice. But here, this was chaos. But under the chaos, there was a bond so strong that even 7 years of silence hadn't broken it. They were screaming because they loved him. They were hitting him because they wanted him back. It was illogical. It was inefficient. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Then, a small voice cut through the shouting. Grandma! Elena froze. Her fists stopped mid-air, slowly. She turned her head. Penny was standing there, peeking out from behind Brennan's leg. She looked exactly like her mother had at that age. The same eyes, the same nose. Elena let out a sound that wasn't a word. It was a wail of pure, agonizing joy. "Oh my God," Jared whispered. He fell to his knees, ignoring his bad joints. "Penny." Penny hesitated. She looked up at Brennan. He nodded. "Go on, sweet pea," he whispered. Penny stepped forward. Daddy said you made good cookies, but he said you were mad at him." "Oh, baby." Elena dropped to the floor, pulling Penny into her arms. "I am not mad at you, never at you." Jared wrapped his arms around both of them. The three of them became a knot of sobbing, shaking humanity on the cold metal floor of the docking bay. Brennan stood over them, tears dripping off his chin, feeling a weight lift off his chest that he hadn't realized was crushing him for a decade. After a long time, the sobbing subsided into sniffles. Elena looked up at Brennan. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy. "You look terrible," she said, wiping her nose. "You are too thin." "I am working on it." Brennan smiled weakly. "The food here is getting better." "And who fixed you?" Jared asked, struggling to stand up with Penny's help. "You said in the message you said you were cured." "I was," Brennan said. He took a deep breath. "But I didn't do it alone." He turned toward the pillar. Valindra. The Empress stepped out of the shadows. She lowered her hood. The hanger lights caught the silver of her hair and the gold of her eyes. Her ears swiveled forward. Her presence was undeniable. She radiated power like a sun. Elena and Jared gasped. They had seen aliens before, but never a Kelvari highborn, and certainly never an Empress. "This is Valindra," Brennan said, stepping to her side. He didn't bow. He just stood next to her. "She saved my life. She saved Penny. And she is the reason I called you." Valindra looked at the two elderly humans. She saw the fear in their eyes. She saw the way they judged her claws, her slit pupils. She did something she had practiced in the mirror for 3 hours that morning. She smiled. It wasn't her usual sharp, predatory smirk. It was a genuine, if slightly awkward, attempt at warmth. "Greetings," Valindra said. Her voice was soft, modulating the natural growl out of it. "Brennan has told me much about your cookies." Elena stared at her. Then she looked at Brennan. Then back at the 7-foot-tall alien Catwoman. "You saved him?" Elena asked. "He saved me first," Valindra replied. "We traded." Elena studied Valindra. She was a mother. She knew things. She saw the way Valindra was standing shoulder to shoulder with Brennan. Not in front of him. Not behind him. She saw the way Brennan leaned slightly toward her, like a plant toward the sun. Elena straightened her jacket. She took a breath. "Well," Elena said, her voice regaining some of its old steel, "if you put up with him for this long, you must be a saint, or crazy." "A bit of both, I suspect," Valindra said, her eyes twinkling. Jared laughed. It was a shaky laugh, but it was real. "Welcome to the family, Your Majesty. I hope you like stubborn idiots, because you picked the king of them." Valindra looked at Brennan. "I am learning to manage." 3 days later, Hangar Bay 4 was transformed. It was still a working hangar. Valindra had insisted on that, and Brennan had agreed. This was where they met. This was where they fought. This was where they saved each other. To hold the ceremony anywhere else would have been a lie. But the grease had been scrubbed from the floors. Banners of Kelvari silk hung from the gantries, mixing with streamers of Earth-style crepe paper that Penny and Torvin had hung up. The smell of ozone was masked by thousands of white flowers that had been shipped in from the hydroponic gardens. The entire station had turned out. Mechanics in clean jumpsuits stood next to Kelvari diplomats in ceremonial armor. It was a visual representation of the new order Valindra was building, a chaotic, messy, wonderful blend of worlds. Brennan stood at the end of the aisle. He was wearing a formal Kelvari tunic, deep indigo, with silver embroidery, but he had kept his combat boots. He said he needed the traction in case he had to run. Jared stood beside him as his best man, looking proud and bewildered in equal measure. "You okay, son?" Jared whispered. "My heart rate is 140, Brennan whispered back. "And I think I forgot how to breathe." "Just look at her," Jared advised. "That usually helps." The music started. It wasn't a traditional march. It was a blend of Kelvari throat singing and a soft, acoustic melody from Earth. Penny walked down the aisle first. She was the flower girl. But instead of petals, she was tossing shiny, harmless metal washers that chimed like bells when they hit the floor. She was grinning from ear to ear. Then came Valindra. The hanger went silent. She wasn't wearing armor. She wasn't wearing the heavy robes of state. She was wearing a dress of liquid silver that seemed to flow over her body like water. Her hair was loose, cascading down her back. Her eyes were glowing, not with intimidation, but with happiness. She walked alone. A queen did not need to be given away. She came of her own free will. When she reached Brennan, she didn't bow, and neither did he. They clasped hands, human skin against Kelvari biomesh. The ceremony was short. They had written it themselves. "I, Valindra Soth Khan," she said, her voice ringing clear without a microphone. "Take you, Brennan Holt, to be my anchor, my truth. When the universe is loud, you are my quiet. When the metal breaks, you are the fix." Brennan swallowed the lump in his throat. "I, Brennan Holt, take you, Valindra, to be my well, my everything. I promise to keep your ship flying. I promise to tell you when you are being stubborn. And I promise to never look away, no matter how scary you try to be." There was a ripple of laughter through the crowd. The officiating priest, a Kelvari elder, who looked like he disapproved of everything but was too afraid to say so, bound their hands with a ribbon of light. "I now pronounce you bonded," the elder grumbled. Brennan leaned in. "So, do I kiss the bride, or do we headbutt?" "Kissing is preferred," Valindra whispered. He kissed her. It wasn't a tentative peck. It was a kiss that sealed a pact between species. The crowd erupted. Elena was sobbing into a handkerchief. Torvin was cheering so loud his voice cracked. As they broke the kiss, Valindra looked out at the crowd. Her eyes landed on a young, junior engineer in the front row, a human kid, barely 20, who was staring at her with his mouth hanging open, clearly overwhelmed by her beauty. Valindra's eyes narrowed. Her lip curled back just a fraction. "Look at me again," she growled, her voice dropping to that terrifying bass register. "And you are dead." The kid turned pale. The hanger went dead silent for a second. Then, Brennan laughed. He threw his arm around Valindra's waist. "Relax, kid," Brennan shouted to the terrified engineer. "She is joking mostly. She only kills with paperwork and boring meetings now." The crowd roared with laughter. The tension broke. Valindra smirked, leaning into Brennan. "I was not joking," she whispered in his ear. "He was staring at my ears." "He was staring at a goddess," Brennan corrected. "Let him look. He knows he can't touch." That night, the celebration had moved to the observation decks. But Brennan and Valindra had retreated to the quiet of the Empress's private quarters. It was peaceful. The stars of the Agni sector drifted by the viewport. Brennan was sitting on the edge of the massive bed, unbuttoning his tunic. Valindra was at her desk, her silver dress shimmering in the low light. "So," Brennan said, kicking off his boots, "we did it. We are married. I am officially the first gentleman of the Empire. Or is it the first mechanic?" "You are the chief engineer," Valindra said. "And my husband. Let us not complicate the titles." She picked up a datapad from her desk. She held it for a moment, hesitating. "Brennan," she said, "there is something I never told you." Brennan looked up, sensing the shift in her mood. "Uh-oh. Do you have a secret husband on Mars? Is it Torvin? I knew he looked at you funny." Valindra didn't smile. She walked over and sat next to him. She handed him the datapad. "Do you remember why I didn't kill you that first day?" she asked. "In the hangar, when you looked me in the eye." "Because I am charming," Brennan suggested. "Because I threatened you with bad PR. Because I trusted you, Valindra said. I felt an instinct. A pull. I thought it was just chemistry. Or perhaps the arrogance of a predator recognizing another predator. Brennan looked at the datapad. It was an old file. A very old file. The timestamp was from 12 years ago. It was a flight log from a Kelvari patrol ship, the Voidwalker. I was a cadet, Valindra said softly. 12 years ago. I was not Empress then, just a princess trying to earn her stripes. We were on a routine patrol near the border sectors. Brennan read the log. Incident report. Critical reactor. Failure. Status containment lost. Location Sector 42. Aribity. Brennan froze. Sector 42, that is where the colony was. Yes, Valindra said. We were passing by when your reactor went critical. Our ship was caught in the ionization wave. Our systems fried. We were drifting, blind, right into the path of the explosion. We were going to die, Brennan. My mother was on that ship. I was on that ship. Brennan read further down the log. Incoming transmission, unidentified signal source. Colony, 42 surface. Content. Emergency patch. Code. Remote stabilization. Algorithm. Sender IDB. Holt. Chief Engineer. Brennan's hands started to shake. I remember this, he whispered. I sent a burst transmission. Just before the comms tower melted. I saw a ship on the sensors. I knew I couldn't save the colony. But I thought if I could send a patch to stabilize their shields, maybe they could survive the blast wave. You sent a patch, Valindra said, her voice thick with emotion. You were burning alive in a reactor room, knowing you were going to lose everything. And you took the time to write a code to save a ship you didn't even know. She placed her hand over his on the datapad. That code saved us, she said. It rebooted our shields 3 seconds before the wave hit. We lived. I lived. Brennan stared at her. You were on that ship. I was the comms officer who received the signal, Valindra said. I saw your name, B. Holt. I will never forget it. But the records were lost in the chaos of the war that followed. I thought you died in the explosion. She looked into his eyes. When I saw your name on the personnel file in the hangar, when you looked at me with that same defiance, that same competence, my soul remembered you before my mind did. I didn't spare you because you were funny, Brennan. I spared you because I owed you a life. I owed you my life. Brennan was silent. He processed the impossible geometry of fate. He had spent 7 years thinking the universe had taken everything from him at Colony 42. He had thought his sacrifice was just a tragedy, but it wasn't. It was a circle. The act of saving a stranger had saved the woman who would one day save him. Physics, Brennan whispered, tears welling in his eyes. Action and reaction, conservation of energy. Nothing is ever lost. No, Valindra whispered, leaning her forehead against his. Nothing is ever lost. It just waits to be found. She kissed him gently. Thank you, she breathed against his lips, for saving me then and now. Any time, Your Majesty, Brennan smiled, pulling her close. It is part of the service package, no extra charge. Epilogue. The observation deck of Kelvari Station was quiet. The wedding guests had long since departed. The lights were dimmed to simulate the night cycle. 3 figures stood by the massive viewport, looking down into the hangar bay below. Down there. The Shadow's Edge was prepping for a new launch. This time. It wasn't a diplomatic mission. It was a family vacation. The flight plan was set for Earth, a planet Valindra had never visited, but one she was told had excellent oceans and terrible coffee. Look at the ships, Daddy. Penny pressed her face against the glass. She was holding Mr. Sparks up so he could see too. They look like fireflies. They do, Brennan agreed. He was standing with his arm around his wife's waist. He looked healthy. The gray was gone from his skin. The haunted look was gone from his eyes. He looked like a man who had found his place. Are we really going to see the ocean? Penny asked. Yes, Valindra said. And your grandmother promised to teach me how to make what it is called apple pie. You are going to hate it, Brennan warned. It is sticky. I conquer star systems, Valindra said dismissively. I can conquer a pie. She looked at her reflection in the glass. She saw the Empress tall, alien, powerful. But she also saw the woman standing next to the human mechanic. History would rewrite her name. They would no longer call her the Queen of Silence. They would call her the Queen who built bridges. They would tell stories of how the Kelvari Empire changed. Not through war, but through the stubbornness of a single dad who refused to be afraid. Valindra tightened her grip on Brennan's waist. "Are you ready, my husband?" she asked. Brennan looked at her. He looked at the vertical pupils, the pointed ears, the sharp smile that he loved more than breathing itself. "I am ready," Brennan said. "But just remember one thing." "What?" "If you get seasick on the ocean," Brennan grinned, "I am not cleaning it up." Valindra threw her head back and laughed a sound that was pure, unadulterated joy. "Look at me again," she threatened playfully, her eyes dancing. "And you are doing the dishes for a month." "Deal," Brennan said. He looked at her. He looked at Penny. He looked at the stars. "I am not blinking," he whispered. And for the rest of his very long, very happy life, he never did.